Now this illustration deals still with using, in this case, fractional horsepower motors on a 15 amp circuit breaker, inverse time. But we have to protect and start the largest motor and protect the smallest motor by this rule. Now notice you could have other loads involved here too when we're applying 430.53b of the code. Now notice these are cord and plug connected, as you see in the illustration 18-30. And notice 210.21b2, table 210.21b2, as in boy. But I like to look at table 210.24 because it gives you everything you need to know about receptacles and cord and plug connecting into receptacles. So I suggest you referring to that table. It's very helpful, 210.24. Now notice we have a quarter horsepower motor here, single phase, 230 volt. And right below it, we have 1/3 horsepower motor, single phase, 230 volt. Next to it, we have a quarter horsepower motor, single phase, 230 volt, and a 1/6 horsepower motor at 230 volt. And we want to know if these motors could be connected to that 15 amp circuit breaker in accordance with 430.53b. So let's look at some calculation procedures. And in step 1, again, 430.6a1, instead of referring you to table 430.250 for 3-phase, the reference is to table 430.248 for single phase. And a 6 horsepower is 2.2 amp. A quarter horse is 2.9 amp. Another quarter horse is 2.9 amp. And then the third horse is 3.6. So those are the motors that are being connected to this 15 amp branch circuit. Now, adding in step 2 those full load current ratings of step 1, we come up with 11.6 amp. Now, again, step 2, 1 divided by 125%, you reduce the loading of that 15 amp breaker to 80%, which would be 12 amps when you see the math done in step 3. Now, application and verification of 430.53b along with table 210.21b as in boy 2, we notice that the 11.6 amps is less than 12 amps. So the calculated load of step 2 of 11.6 amps is less than 80% of the 15 amp circuit breaker, which is 12 amps. So yes, we could load those receptacles to a 15 amp circuit breaker is shown when we apply step 5. The 250% of 2.2 amps, the smallest motor, is 5.5. So that motor would be allowed to be put upon that circuit, connected to that circuit, maybe is a better word, of the 15 amp rating. And then, of course, we could also see that we could start the largest motor at 3.6 amps. So when we apply then our table 430.52, we go through those 4 steps. What phase is the motor? Single phase. What type of motor? Induction motor. What's the design of the motors? We'll say it's a B, class B. Then we're going to use an inverse time circuit breaker in the 5th column of table 430.52, so we pick up the 250% rule. So when everything is done and completed with step 1 through step 6, the solution shows, as in figure 18-30, that the smallest rated motor is considered protected, and we can connect in accordance with 240.6a and table 240.6a when we select the 15 amp circuit breaker and add the 11.6 amp load to it. we are below the 80% rule of 80% of 15, which is 12 amp. And that's exactly what this figure 18-30 is illustrating, how you could put those fractional horsepower motors, more than one, on a 15 amp circuit as long as you follow the rules of 430.53b. And you could even have some lighting loads on there, other loads by that section.